Is called to order at 5:37. And I'll do roll call.
Or I can do roll
You do
call.
roll call, thank
just
you.
move us. Commissioner Parker.
Here.
Commissioner Wolf.
Here.
Commissioner Nemeth.
Here.
And Commissioner Young is not able to be here today.
Do we need a motion to approve the agenda? Not really, right?
No.
Okay.
Just need to ask everyone if the agenda is approved and if there's any additions to the agenda.
Any additions to the agenda? Does everyone approve the agenda?
Looks good.
Okay.
Looks good.
Okay. Okay, so now we would have the first public commentary, but we don't have any members of the public here, so
Right.
we'll move on.
Good. This one we do need a motion for.
So I would need a motion to approve the minutes.
I move to approve.
Second.
Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. We don't have any presentations.
No.
Okay, so regular business, starting with the producer-only checklist.
Okay, great. Thank you. So after our last meeting, I started to kind of piece out, create a checklist. Like we had talked about making a checklist of sort of for some of these different items that are often at market. So I started with the growers. And, what are the common jobs that go with the growers that they perform? And then which of these jobs, realistically, sometimes, as we acknowledged last meeting, some of them are contracted out. Like you don't have a tractor, so you hire somebody to bring in their tractor, plant the seeds for you, so on and so forth. So some of them are hired out, some of them are done by you. And then are there certain things that if the grower didn't do them, we would consider that kind of, okay, X, you have to do that to be considered producer only. So there's a checklist, and then there's a what everybody has to do. And then I also created some more guidelines for honey, maple syrup. We had said we maybe wanted to do it for chocolate, but I didn't do it for chocolate because I didn't have enough knowledge of it, and I probably need to
It's a hard one.
talk to Mindo. Coffee, cheese, and then prepared foods. And I also didn't do prepared foods because it's such a broad category that was kind of difficult to get started on. So I don't know if we just want to waive that one and consider it on a case-by-case basis for now, or if someone else has ideas, I'm totally open to hearing them. I also put together a definition of a employee versus a separate contractor. So I think some of the main differences that, the IRS spells out are, like, an employee is somebody who earns a specific wage or a salary. They have a contract, or implied or written, with their employer, and the employer kind of tells them what to do. So they are under the supervision and direction of their employer. Whereas with a contractor, the relationship is between two businesses on kind of equal footing. One is providing a service to the other. And, as Jeff had mentioned with his business, like, part of it is, are you, with the equipment, like, an employee would be usually using their employer's equipment. But if it's a main task, and the contractor is, like, usually bringing their own equipment to the job, performing the job themselves, they're more on an equal footing with the person they're working with. So, I thought that was kind of a short summary that made a lot of sense. Because we were sort of struggling to define, well, when is an employee doing the work versus a contractor? I also included in the packet Etsy guidelines for, you know, how do they differentiate their artists? You know, how do they tell that their artists are making their own goods? And they sort of break it into two pieces. And so they have makers and designers. So like a maker is a person who's by hand, creating this. And a designer typically partners with, or can partner with, I forget what they call it, production assistants. So they come up with the design, and then they have another party produce it for them. But in both instances, you know, they're pretty clear about this has to be an original product. It has to be, it can't just be making some very basic decisions about a thing and then having it made. It has to be like an artistic design that's unique. And then being transparent is the other big piece that Etsy has. If you do work with someone else to produce your item, they have them produce your items, you have to be very clear that they did that for you and who it was. Which we don't have as a piece, but, you know, might be something, if we feel like there's any gray area while we're talking about these things, you know, maybe we could add that transparency piece, and that would help with things. And then, yeah, so I guess if everyone wants to just kind of, we can start at the top and take a look at the grower vendor checklist. I think my questions would be like, is there anything that checklist we could add that we're missing? Or, you know, thoughts on it. So using own equipment and tools this is what I envisioned either our inspector using as a checklist when she visits the farms to do the inspections to make sure they're producer only, or when we get an application from a new vendor and we're not sure, using this as sort of like to test it out. Grower vendor checklist. Use own equipment and tools. Do they use their own land? Do the owner or employees plant? Do the owner or employees irrigate if necessary? Do they harvest? Do they perform the post-harvest handling and packing? And does the owner actively manage production? So kind of day to day.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I'm curious just about the packing. It seems to me like that's something that often gets outsourced, and I wonder if that's not something that that seems to me that it would still be an owner grower who's doing all of the work, but often it's much more affordable or efficient to have co-packing done elsewhere or packing, you know. And so this sounds like it's like from start to finish that we're expecting the full spectrum of work going into a final product that's coming to the market. So I just wondered about that.
Yeah, good. Okay, so to take this a little further, and I think when we get to the next section, you'll see. I think these were all pieces that I saw that could be, and it was advantageous for the grower, the owner, to be doing these things, but not necessary. So even if they weren't packing it themselves, we would still consider them as the producer of that product.
I see. So so you're intending this checklist then to be like an assessment of where they're at, and maybe part of our discussion is whether we require some of these?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't.
Yeah, no,
I didn't
and
understand that.
and when we get to this next section, it'll be a little more clear. But like, sort of, you know, they get a grade because like they get A, B, C, or D or something because they do 2 of those things, and then you're like,
I like that.
you're not doing a lot. But if they do, you know, 9 out of 10 of them, then yes.
I'm just curious. I'm not trying to be argumentative. I just want an example of when they'd outsource packing.
So I don't know about farmer vendors, but I know that value-added producers, you know, often if they're growing their own food and then creating like a prepared food, they'll
Oh,
take
okay. All right.
but the product itself might still be sold here at
Right.
market.
Okay.
It just, so.
I thought you were talking about farmers,
Oh.
the actual, the
Yes.
vegetables and stuff.
Yes, we are.
That could happen, but I
Yeah.
don't know enough about that to know if that
Okay.
is something. And it sounds like it's not something that you've seen happen, so.
No, I've never heard of it. I was
Okay.
just curious
Yeah.
more than anything.
That, I can't actually think of an example when the owner wouldn't be packing their own stuff. I think this was just a list of okay, these are the steps that it takes to get one thing to market. So maybe that is something we make a requirement. I don't know. But good question. I can't think of an example right now. I'll think on it. So this piece kind of ties into the next piece, so I just want to bring this in. So instances when we would request changes to the practice. So these items were things that I saw as being vitally important. The vendor is active in production. Oh, sorry. If they did this, then they wouldn't qualify. So, a vendor is active in production less than 50% of the time it takes to get a product from farm to market. So looking at a time piece of that. Less than, and we pick a number, of this checklist up here applies. So if they've only got 2 of those items checked off, then they need to make some changes or they can't come. Using land not their own with no lease on file with the market. So a lease, we require leases of any property a grower is using, signed by both parties. So the leases we should have it on file, and they should detail the responsibilities of both. That way we can hold them accountable. An employee in the above checklist must either be an official legal employee or take direction and answer to the owner on a regular basis. An employee is not an independent contractor. So there I'm just kind of trying to get at that difference between contractor and employee. And then the vendor representative at market that is benefiting from the sales is not a direct employee or owner of the business. So is the person at market who is getting the money from the sales at market, so they don't go buy the stuff from someone, bring it to market, and basically resell it.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that all makes sense.
The only one I have a question about would be the lease agreement.
Yeah.
As I mentioned last week, there's been several times when you might know somebody, especially where I'm at, it's hard to get a hold of property.
Yeah.
So you find maybe 3 acres that someone has that's tillable, and they had hay there.
Right.
And they said, hey, can I plant some stuff here? And they say, yeah. And then, but as soon as they allow to let you use it, but then as soon as you ask them, well, I need to get this paper signed, and that, they don't want to sign anything, because then they feel like they're liable. It's not that easy, and it's not gonna avoid anything. Putting it in the rules is not gonna avoid anything, because anyone who's being deceptive or wants to be deceptive, can still be deceptive. I mean, it's just gonna make it more difficult for somebody who has some property that they can farm,
Right.
I understand kind of where you're coming from with that idea, but at the same time, I mean, the inspector should be able to tell when she goes out there, I think that's kind of a per situation
That makes
deal.
sense, yeah.
There's a lawyer that owns some property around the corner from us, and he lives in Las Vegas. And he told me I can farm there, I can do whatever I want there, but he won't sign anything. He said I could sell the property tomorrow. He's a land developer / investor, and he's like, I'm not gonna sign anything with you, because I could sell the property tomorrow.
Right.
So I'm taking a chance when I plant corn or soybeans there.
Sure.
But if I wanted to grow something there for market,
You'd still be the grower.
right.
So what, so that makes a lot of sense to me, and obviously I'm not a grower, so I'm out of my element, but I do understand the need to have some sort of check in place to make sure that people are,
At-
growing on land that is their own or to which they have the rights.
Right.
So what do you think would be a realistic way to have that kind of system in place?
I mean,
Like a letter from the, they probably, if they don't want to sign a lease, they're certainly not going to write a letter.
yeah, I mean, it's, you know, and it's not just, I'm not just saying that for my benefit, I'm just saying
No,
that
I'm
for the
sure.
good of the market. Like,
Right.
all farmers should be able to do that. I know I talked with Duke Donahue, he said the same thing. He said he's got deals with people where he plows their driveway in the wintertime, and they let them farm their 5 acres.
Yeah,
You
it
know,
makes a lot of sense. I mean,
but, you know, at the same time, those people
Informal.
aren't gonna wanna take time to,
That makes sense. Let's talk about like what we don't want to happen situation, and maybe
Okay.
that will help us figure out what we want to ask for. So what we don't want is, you know, a situation where somebody leases or is, you know, says they're growing stuff on someone else's land. And in a lot of cases, well, this is the other thing, in a lot of instances, you're leasing land and space in a person's place. They're also doing stuff on that property for their own business. You know, they're separate businesses. You're producing separate things, but, you know, you're doing the work and for one, and they're doing the work for theirs and for the other one. So we don't want, like, it's on their property. If you're bringing the stuff to market, you have to be the one doing the work for it. They can't be doing it for you and then you bringing it to market. So how do we prevent that confusion from happening, I think?
And in that case, the fear is it'd be like someone is essentially buying from another farmer and reselling it effectively.
Again, yeah, we don't want,
so,
yes.
so what you don't want is you don't want me to take the inspector over to Rulig's and show him Rulig's fields and say, well, this is where I'm getting my stuff from, they're growing, you know, they
Yeah.
work for me.
Yeah.
That's what you're trying to avoid.
Yeah, we're trying
Gotcha.
to avoid, right. So like, say you're trying to get around it, you are actually, in fact, bringing Rulig stuff to the market. You bring the inspector to Rulig's farm and say, here's where I'm getting my stuff. Or something like that.
That's what you're trying to avoid.
Yes. Maybe we can think about that.
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
last question on this, isn't the lease expectation already established?
It's established already, yeah. We do, you know, ask for, and I understand like informal stuff does go on. But in general, we do try and have on properties, especially ones that are being used year after year, to have some sort of lease agreement in place.
And how's that working so far? I mean, do people tell you that it's fine and,
That's, I'm not sure. To be honest, I mean, I think so.
Okay.
I think it's been working okay.
yeah?
Haven't heard any issues with it.
And you probably just don't know the instances when they're growing on other land but don't have a lease,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, and like, that's not the problem. The
Yeah.
problem is when
They're not
they're,
growing it.
they're not growing it.
Right.
I think a lot of that needs to fall on the inspector. I mean, she needs to be able to know, I mean, she's got to be like the judge of this. She needs to be, something don't look right here. I went over to your place and everything was falling down and, you know, looked bad. And then you're going to bring me over here to a 50-acre cabbage field and tell me it's yours? Like, at that point, then there needs to be more questions asked and things need to be looked at more.
Or maybe it also comes to the quantity question, so having her, and she does this already, but making sure she's looking at how much is here in the field and does it match what they're bringing.
And that's the tricky thing too, is if someone were wanting to be deceptive, then having more rules for them to deceive doesn't necessarily make them less deceptive.
That's true. Right, okay. Well, I think that one, that's a good point, and maybe we should just think about more how to, maybe that needs to be changed. But I still think there is something to agreement about using another person's property and,
I think something else that might happen too is you were talking about, like with the Etsy stuff of transparency, that something that doesn't happen to translate through is to have, when these reviews go through, having those be published so that people can actually see them. So that I, as a shopper at the market, could see, you know, like this person uses their own land, has their own tools, things like that. So at least I would know that, which then that does provide some sunshine to that. And also it does provide, I guess, less of incentive to be deceptive in terms of if it's only among the inspector and the farmer, then that's gets put away, whereas if it can be revealed, and also for me to make a decision in terms of, oh, I thought you raised all your stuff. No, we don't raise them, we just, then, okay, well, I'll choose to go somewhere else.
Well, and not just customers, but I suspect that if vendors had any question about one of their fellow vendors' practices, they'd be really interested in looking at that report, and if something didn't seem right, you'd be the first to know.
Yes, I think there is a big danger in making those reports public. I think it could create a lot of conflict and, I mean, there's a lot of finger pointing sort of already. And giving another, like, ability to, I could see it getting out of hand, I guess I'm trying to say. And so, I mean, so they're available through FOIA requests, but we don't generally make them public. I do like the idea of the transparency and making sure customers are educated. But, you know, I wonder, is there like another way to do this? Like, we know the manager and the inspector, and if there are some categories that are really different between some of the vendors, then we can require that as additional labeling at their stall or something. I don't know, that might be another way.
I could see too that instead of having the full report put out, in terms, I think that's too much for a consumer too. If it were, it's almost like a one pager, which has, you know, it's like rows and columns. Here are all the farmers, and here are these boxes, and which ones are checked. And it's just it's much more, it's a summary, a super concise summary, but that's something I can quickly, okay, interesting. And it provides a summary of the results, but doesn't necessarily provide all the nuts and bolts. I can still see the issue with finger pointing and things like that, which is both pros and cons in terms of another policing agency are the other farmers. But sometimes that can be politically messy, and I can see how that would be too. So
Okay. I'm going to write that as another thing to think about. Like,
Okay.
what ways can we bring transparency into this process? How about those items in the checklist? I mean, that question about the packing kind of makes sense to me. But do the other ones look like something that could go either way? Either, you know, it makes sense if this is one piece of the puzzle they're contracting out, or it's something they could do themselves?
Yep.
Great. Let's move on. Honey. So I did, kind of like you suggested, a minimum and a preferred. And I think when we came up with our other definitions for producer only, we said something like, these don't, you know, if we make any requirements, or the preferred are more for admitting new vendors, and we're not going to impose them on current vendors, but when we are getting new vendors, this is what we are going to look for. So we could look at it that way, but, or we could look at it as, you know, we think this is a very integral piece of the process, we want to require it of all vendors. So honey, minimum, perform the majority of hive checks and week-to-week management of the hives, active in 50% or more of the time it takes to get the product from farm to the market. And then preferred would be minimum plus, performing your own extraction, your own bottling, managing the yard and the land around the hives, and doing the mite control and the hive treatments. I don't know if hive treatments are ever contracted out.
I don't know either.
maybe I need to get more input from beekeepers on this.
You're closest to a honey expert.
Yeah, they all sound like they should be
Required?
required.
So one of the points that Jay made at our last meeting was that depending on your size of operation, at some point, it makes more sense to contract, to have someone else do the extraction and bottling for you, rather than buy your own equipment, because of the size, so cost effective. Which sounded like it was kind
Sounds
of a common process, plausible, yeah. So maybe I'll just take this back and get more input from honey vendors.
Yeah.
But in general, it sounds okay to me.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds reasonable. I would imagine too that, I mean, it seems like mite control or hive treatments might be such a specialized skill set too, that might be one you would also want to contract out from time to time, but I
No.
truly, no, okay,
It's
no,
not, it's not
No.
very
Bee
involved
vets
at
or
all.
something.
it's not,
No.
okay.
Um,
If I were dealing with mites, I would contract it out
Get
so
an
that,
entomologist here right away.
but I,
Well,
I mean,
take
that's
your
more
point.
like, that might be more day-to-day
Yeah, the-
management.
The
like, that
problem
kind of
is
falls
if you
under
didn't do any of that,
management.
and you didn't
Right.
extract it, and you didn't bottle it yourself,
What
What
time
are
are
you
you putting
doing?
in?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
okay,
so,
That's true.
but, yeah. I don't think it's that involved. I know my grandpa always just did it himself. I think, I'm not 100% certain, but I think it was either something you put in the smoker, and you just smoke them, or it was something you put like in a pump-up sprayer and you spray. It wasn't anything involved.
Yeah, I agree. That's pretty simple. That might be more of a requirement. The other ones it's plausible, you might want to hire out a piece of that. Maybe that's more like perform 2 out of 3 of these things. Or
Yeah.
perform at least one of these 3 things, something like that. Okay, but I'll get some more input from beekeepers. Okay. Maple syrup, pretty straightforward. Chocolate, do coffee. Coffee should be roasted by the vendor. Minimum plus, they should package it
Package it.
themselves, and if they do any value added, they should do that too. Although I can't see them like roasting it and then having someone else
yeah.
do the value added,
There are companies that will do that,
do they?
but I wouldn't think that would fly in this market.
No, maybe we should make all those a requirement.
Yeah, packaging, again, it seems like packaging is kind of the thing we're trying to avoid. By having someone else who packages it is maybe the least, where it's more the opposite, where you don't do anything but package it.
Right,
So
exactly.
that's usually the worst
Yeah.
case. So
Yeah.
even discussion of who packages it,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Cheese, minimum culture and age, the cheese. Preferred, use your own animals.
Sure.
And then I didn't do prepared foods. Does anybody have opinions about prepared foods?
It's complicated.
It's complicated?
Yeah.
Should that be more like on a case-by-case basis?
I think so, and we've had, throughout the years too, we've had lots of discussions with various
Yeah.
vendors coming in, and some on the whole continuum, and it is a hard one to make a call on.
Yeah.
And it also
Right.
changes so much case by case, and
Yeah.
also what the market needs. If there's been
Right.
lots of push for this thing, okay, or for there are 10 people already doing that.
Right.
So what is complicated about it? Because it's, again, it seems to me fairly straightforward. It seems like if you are preparing the food, then you are the owner, vendor, the preparer of the food. So I'm sure that it's not that simple, but can you give me an example?
Also, like if you're a baker, do you make all your own flour? Do you grow the wheat?
So you're talking about ingredients,
Ingredients,
not
or-
actual
Or do you
preparation.
have a preparation of something that's just a composite of 2 things that you buy from the store? You make
Like a spice mix or something?
or like you make banana with cookies or something, and you mix them together, and therefore those are 2 non-farmers market products at all, and you don't really cook them, you just mash them together.
I see.
Is that a suitable
Right.
product for the farmer's market? And well, they did make it. It isn't they have a recipe, and they did, it's kind of like the designer thing. They didn't really make the ingredients so much themselves, but they did squish them together. And
Okay. Yep.
so,
Yeah,
Got it.
exactly.
or it
Thank
only
you.
has one local ingredient, and that's 1% of it.
Right, right. Got
How
it.
does that count?
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I did have one other comment
Yeah.
on this idea. So I was thinking about like this idea of having a checklist and is it 5 out of 6 or whatever? And the transparency issue. And one thing I thought is I wondered if there's a way to almost establish a point system. So like if, say for honey, we would give, and then each item could have its own number of points. So if we think like doing your own honey extract, just as an example, doing your own extraction and bottling is really important, so that could be 10 points each, and then the other are just a couple of points, say. And then we could, so each of these could have the vendor at the end gets a number of points, and they have to reach a certain minimum to qualify. And then that is what is actually transparent and what is shared with consumers. So it's just an idea of maybe a way that these two issues that we have in terms of assessing whether someone's considered a grower vendor and the transparency issue without sharing the full inspection report. So,
That's an idea. Good.
So I'd like to, now that we've kind of hashed these out, send this out again and see what we hear back. If that sounds good? Okay,
sounds good.
we'll do that. All right. Oh, and I did include the, I know it's next on the agenda
Okay,
as the attachment, the producer-only guideline recommendations. I included those again, they're the same. They have not been changed or updated since the last meeting. So this could just be the addition that goes out with it.
That seems good.
Okay.
just to refresh everyone
Yeah, it was
as to
just sort
what
of
the
set a
guidelines are
reminder.
now. Yeah, no, that seems smart.
Okay.
Can I, one comment too about the independent versus employee thing, that
Yes.
one way you might differentiate that too is you just look at their taxes. And if you're an employee, you get a W-4, or if you're a contractor, you get a 1099. And so that is a legal definition that already exists
Yeah.
as to where that is. And that, from an inspection viewpoint, that's a pretty black and white kind of thing. So,
I think the trouble we run into is not everyone uses the W-4s and the W-2s.
It's also legal to have casual labor. I think if someone works for you, and as long as they don't make, I want to say it's like $3,800 a year, you're legally allowed to pay them cash.
okay.
So,
Yeah, and that happens quite a bit.
yeah, it's casual labor is a common thing for farmers.
But, yeah, good idea. I had thought about that.
Okay,
But
yeah.
then, yeah, I think it would just
Yep.
be too difficult to obtain. Okay. Nope. I'm going to move us along.
Okay, so that's all regular business, and there is no new business.
I
Is there?
have a new business.
Okay. there is
Non-agenda
New
item.
business.
So, now that the law has changed, we have been getting several requests from vendors to bring hemp products and CBD products. These are all, the ones that people have been requesting to bring are, below the level of THC that would, make it wouldn't be like marijuana or pot, it would just be a very low level. Or just, straight hemp as a fiber or a flavoring, that kind of thing. So those things, we've checked with legal just to see, is it even possible to sell these at the farmer's market? Legally, yes, it is. So I think our next step, since it is a new product and a lot of people are growing it, is for us to decide, how do we want to respond as the market? So I would like to, my thought was to reach out to some of the growers who have asked to bring that to market and get them to come to one of our meetings to educate us about what do they grow? what type of licensing is involved that we need to be asking for? What kinds of products would we be looking at? And like, do we want to have these items at market at all? Which ones? I mean, we don't want to bring on a ton at once if we do, but like, how much do we want to start with? I think these are all PMAC questions. So would anyone be opposed to hearing from some of these growers? And then can you think of any initial questions you might have for them that I can tell them to come prepared to answer?
So there's 2 licenses. It's $150. You can get a license to grow it. And you can grow as much as you want because it's federally legal now. So it's my understanding you can grow as much as you want for $150 for your license. So you have to be licensed. And then there's a processor's license. It's $1,200 or $1,300. So I would say anybody you're going to let on the market, I would say for that, because you're going to have such an overwhelming response of people wanting to do it, that they're going to have to, I would say that they'd have to fall under both categories. They'd have to grow it themselves and process it themselves. Otherwise, it's just going to turn into a market of nothing but people standing around with chapstick and air fresheners and whatever the heck else they make out of it. And another thing is, I mean, I'm sure you already have some vendors that are already there that would, like you said, people are already asking you. So
Yeah, we do.
I would say I would, just for the good of the market, my advice would be to kind of put a cap on, like, hey, you're here and you're selling this stuff and you're selling vegetables and flowers that you grow or whatever it is, and you want to add this to your, what you're selling, then that would be more acceptable than just starting to take in all kinds of stray people that want to do this. Because I think that could get out of control real fast.
Yeah.
And I don't think it'd be healthy for the market.
I do think it makes sense to give a priority to current vendors who might want to add it as a product. Should I then just reach out to our current vendors and ask them to come? Or should I reach out to everyone who has contacted me and ask them to come?
Let's at least start with current vendors.
Okay, we have
That would be
some.
my inclination.
We have some vendors who are not current vendors who have been very involved and interested in the process and who have asked actually to come to present to us. So, I mean, I could tell them no, or we could just hear them out.
I think it'd be interesting to hear, and just to hear it's a space I know nothing about, and so, and I think it probably would be, there's the risk of overrunning everything with this, but at the same time too, we already have that if we have to manage what the portfolio that we offer here too, so that's always been an issue for any product that we sell. Everyone's selling donuts, we don't want everyone selling, we want some people, but not everyone. And so how do you have diversity of product? And I think that seems, and probably it's almost like the same thing with the checklist too, in terms of is there does that become its own class? And just like this new opportunity, we have the opportunity here to maybe test out a new set of criteria, of establishing a set of criteria and really with the required minimums and preferreds, and then use that as our way to kind of systematically choose among the population of say who we want to produce what. So that might be a good way to road test a new venue in that way too.
Okay, good. Okay, that sounds good. So I will invite them to come for public comment to maybe our next meeting or the one after. And yeah, just present some brief, everybody, we'll have them keep it short, because I think there'll be a few that.
Now, I just thought of something that you might want to, it might be worth thinking about this. It might be something that you just want to exclude from the market completely for this fact alone, is I believe you have to be 18 years old to buy it. So if
Okay.
you open it up to this, can I make hard cider and bring it to market? You know, I mean, we're kind of, I was kind of under the assumption that that's why we didn't have wine at the market, and we didn't have alcohol for sale at the market, was because of the age limit and the legalization of you got to be a certain age. So now who's going to police that?
Yeah.
And it might be opening up a whole new,
Yeah, that's a good question. I've actually been working on the requirements to get a vendor that sells alcoholic products that market, because wine sales, hard cider are a big thing at farmers markets. We have people who are interested. So it's a very long legal process. So, yeah, that's one question, if we do or don't want it to, but I don't know that we've necessarily ruled out
I'm
having
not saying right now,
alcoholic
like,
vendors.
throw it out. I'm just saying it's something to think about.
Yeah. Mhm. Right, yeah.
Good point.
Yep, yeah, you're right. And do we want this product at market at all? Okay. And I think hearing from the growers will help us kind of see. But I think we also need to be clear in our communication with them that, you know, we want to learn more, but this does not mean, we're not making promises.
It's not yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
I am really curious about CBD air fresheners. So
I'm sure they're out there.
probably, you're probably right.
Okay,
Where are we now?
next thing on the agenda.
Reports. Okay, so that's all the new business, so time for the market manager report.
Okay. I gotta find it.
I see a
Let's see
questionnaire.
Is it in there?
I just see the questionnaire. What would you like to see more of?
There it is.
Before that.
It's before the questions.
Ah, there we go, yes.
Okay.
It's before the Etsy.
Got it.
Okay, infrastructure update. So they dug down around 3 of the posts at the market to see how stable they are. So that's gonna tell us if they'll be able to support the roll down sides. They just did it, so I have not heard the results, but we'll know soon. And I have a meeting with the solar guy. They are gonna do an assessment to see if we can, there's enough room to put solar on the market that it would power the heating along the main aisle. Or would we need to supplement the energy with something else? So do we have enough space for panels? So that's that.
Okay.
Customer surveys. So we do these every year. I attached, the last 2 pages are the surveys. We've been doing dot surveys with the customers. We've just started. But, you know, this data will continue to collect for a few weeks, and then I'll bring it back and let you guys know what the results are. They're pretty much the same questions we asked last year, so that we can compare year to year. Yeah, so
Great.
you guys can see what those questions are. The farm to table dinner, we raised over $6,800 for a mini grant fund that Slow Food Huron Valley will make available. The idea was this could be a fund that our farms could apply to invest, you know, add to their business, especially, you know, prioritize things that we think as a market we need more of, or we're worried are getting, like, as vendors retire, we're losing. So hoping some vendors will invest, like, plant those things or get them established, so we'll have them in the future. But, you know, really it's pretty open. There aren't a whole lot of requirements for it. So we'll be meeting soon to help establish the application process, so people can apply. Yeah, so we raised about $6,800, and then $400 went to vendors for supplies. Events, you know, we have the Halloween bash, have some glass blowing. It'll be a fun month. And then the last Wednesday market is December 18th for the year.
Coming up.
That's about it. That's all I have.
Great. Any questions? Okay, thank you, Stephanie. Okay, opening it up for second public comments. No members of the public are here. So if there's nothing else, we could move to adjourn.
Sounds good.
I
we
think,
wanna
I
have a
think, I
motion?
think we need a
Make a
motion.
motion.
Oh, I move to adjourn.
Okay,
Oh, second.
okay. And then call the time.
And it is 6:21.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.